I'm sorry. I'm just like, this is like my fifth take because I'm just so upset. So I woke up this morning to bad news in a chat that I'm with Abdul El Sayed volunteers. And they've been canvassing and talking to Democratic voters who are now concerned that he can't win Michigan because they are repeating the lies being pushed by Haley Stevens. And it's working. And when you compare it to a grassroots candidate funded by us, you know, Abdul can go buy ads, but he has to pay pretty much top dollar because, like anything, when you go in with Haley's money, with millions of dollars, you get a discount.
We do not care.
So lately, we've been talking about this theme within the Democrat coalition where third world is starting to kill off woke, which is to say, if you envision the Democrat establishment often to be comprised of and supported by, let's say, traditional white woke liberal hippies, that over time, as these people import more and more third worlders and rile up minorities to be part of their coalition, the politics of the Democrat Party are going to resemble much less trans, feminist, LGBT, whatever, but rather just violently resentful third worldism, which is to say jihadism, black nationalism, all those things. And you start to notice how that's seeming to take over now, right? I remember a time, for example, when pride marches were larger than Palestine marches in the United States. Notice how that has flipped. Do we think that is much of a coincidence given the third worldification of the Democrat coalition? I don't exactly think so, but perhaps the best example of this theme is the Michigan Senate primary, kind of an underreported but very noteworthy election that is taking place within the Democrat Party, where we have what you could say is just the archetype of the divide within this coalition. Because on one hand, we have the establishment favorite, Haley Stevens, typical archetype, like crazy woke white girl hippie kind of thing going on there, right? And then on the flip side, sort of similar to that story about the migrant and the girlfriend that we reported over the weekend, we have the progressive far left challenger, a guy by the name of Abdul El Sayed. And you could probably ascertain what this guy's politics are. Again, just trying to rile up these violently resentful third worlders. What's his entire platform? The Democrat establishment is corrupt because they're paid by AIPAC, and I proudly will say my political stance is we're against Israel, we support Palestine, we want to abolish ICE, which is to say what, right? Just maximum third worldism. I want all of my people to flood the Middle East, flood Western countries. It's a full on in the end, right? You can call it progressive politics all you want. In the end, it's like a third world jihadist takeover. That's what he really supports. That is his end vision. And that shouldn't be surprising coming from a guy named Abdul El Sayed. But of course, if you have paid attention to Democrat primaries over this past year, you probably understand that the writing is on the wall for establishment pick Haley Stevens. This is, of course, a time where, as I said, third world is taking over. They are replacing the old woke liberal establishment and making it something that, while maybe not as socially radical on certain issues, is in many ways more violent and more crazy. And that is exactly, folks, what is going on. And I want to tell you all about it here today as we show you this current divide in the Michigan Senate race, where there's this whole kind of cat and mouse game going on where each side is trying to say, you're unelectable. Well, you're bought by AIPAC, all of this stuff. And both, frankly, appear to be relatively weak candidates by Democrat standards. I mean, again, it's not exactly as if the establishment pick here is some type of dynamo, but of course the progressive pick is what? Radical, crazy, one of the red-green race communists. That's exactly what it is. Let's talk about it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, let us hone in on someone we might call Islamic Graham Plattner. Frankly, somebody who probably would have met the fate of Graham Plattner had he not been a brown Muslim. I think that's actually an interesting double standard to point out in the Democrat Party. But still, nonetheless, we have Abdul El Sayed, who's made his entire thing that, oh, well, I'm not taking money from AIPAC, therefore that makes me a good person or something like that. Well, would it exactly surprise you to find out that in a long-running train of, let's say, I don't know, jihadi politicians out of the Midwest, if you know what I mean by that, like he's not the first. It turns out that he himself basically is the grifter. He talks about money and politics in the Israel lobby, and yet this guy, quite interestingly, guess what? Is refusing to release his tax returns, which is, of course, something, let's not forget, they criticize Trump for and all this stuff, but hey, not a secret that Trump is rich or wealthy or whatever. This guy, though, is running, let's not forget, right? As the progressive. He's against corruption. He's against money in politics. He so happens to be a descendant of Islamic immigration to the Midwest. And then knowing what goes on there with many different forms of fraud, suddenly the guy won't release his tax returns. And so they keep on asking this question, especially if you're the progressive, you support campaign finance reform and all those things, why on earth won't you release your tax returns? And in typical AIPAC grifter, third world grifter type of behavior, what does he do? He instantly brings up AIPAC, right? Hey, you seem pretty corrupt, dude. You're shady. Are you committing fraud like so many of your compatriots over in the Midwest coming from certain diasporas of people? No. AIPAC, buddy. What, did AIPAC tell you to ask that question, right? And this is actually a common thread. It happens all the time. We can point out substantively, this person is messed up for this reason, that reason. Actually, they're too a corrupt politician. How much are you getting paid by AIPAC, bro, right? Typical type of stuff. But take a listen.
Nurses, AFT have all supported us because when it comes to the choice between working people and corporations, I will pick people every time.
Yeah, and it's the only reason you haven't released your tax returns. All right, and 15 labor unions are endorsing me. Thank you. I yield, Rick. Yes.
I do want to ask you, because Haley Stevens, your opponent, has been going after you about a separate issue for not releasing your tax returns or financial disclosures before the primary. She's been campaigning as the lone non-millionaire in the race. Are you concerned that by releasing those financial records, you'll show you to be considerably wealthier than Stevens while you're courting working class voters?
Not at all. I'm going to release my tax return this week. What I'll just tell you is that what she's desperately trying to change the picture on is the fact that you have $40 million of outside spending brought to you by our local utility that forced people to sleep in the dark for 5 days after a minor storm, that she's taking money from AIPAC that wants to send our money abroad, that she's taking money from big tech and the health insurance industry. You want to talk about financial transparency? I'm happy to do that all day.
Yeah, and it's just so typical, right? I point this out all the time to people who say, oh, the Israel lobby is my top issue. I respect any politician who doesn't take money from AIPAC. Yeah, Ilhan Omar doesn't take money from AIPAC. Does that therefore make her a good person? I mean, I suppose, right? If that's your whole ideology in the end, is just becoming a third world leftist coded jihadi, then I guess that makes perfect sense. And you would be completely willing to overlook the fact that Ilhan LARPs as a progressive talking about money in politics and campaign finance reform, and then look at what she's doing with her life. Abdul El Sayed is, first of all, what you might call the typical champagne socialist, right? These people all LARP as revolutionaries, yet they're rich, yet they're, oftentimes not even like self-made people. Look at Mamdani, for example, right? Just like that whole thing was paid for by his family and whatnot. But, he's a hero of the working class. Same thing. The so-called heroes of the working class somehow are never working class. Same situation with Graham Plattner, right? This guy pretended he's just some like working class oyster farmer. Turns out he's effectively a trust fund baby. You know how this stuff goes. But then combine that with, again, why does Abdul El Sayed not want us to know where his money comes from? Given that this is the Midwest and we have certain patterns. I'm just saying, right? You're living up to certain stereotypes with that one, buddy. But still, you'll notice this constant pattern with him, which is the deflection and obfuscation from not only obvious corruption, but let's be honest, just obvious, just general far left insane politics. For example, in another recent CNN interview, CNN tries to say, right, they point out, this is just what Mamdani did as well, right? You say that you never called to defund the police, but you literally did back in 2020. Very typical. I'm not radical. Hey, here's a long track record of me being extremely radical. What is El Sayed's ridiculous, obfuscating, honestly, very typical scammer? He's a scammer. You know what I mean, right? Scammer type of response. Used car salesman type of stuff. you fixate on the word defund. Hey, I didn't say. They point out to him. You said you didn't you want to defund the police. You did. What? And this guy's here like Socrates or something. You say defund. What does defund mean? I don't know, buddy. Defund means defund, right? But this is the game he plays.
I believe that we do need to defund the police insofar as defunding the police is disinvesting in the means of incarcerating someone or killing them on the streets. What if we were to invest in social services? What if we were to invest in public schools? What if we were to invest in public libraries? What would the world look like there? And I think that has to be the way we go. And that means both investing more in these services, and it also means investing less in police.
So why did you say you never call for defunding the police when it sounded like you did in the past?
You know, what's interesting about that comment is I go in as far as defining what I mean by that. Do you disagree with investing in libraries and public services and social services? You fixate on the word defund.
This guy is literally such a repulsive liar, completely full of crap. Hey, idiot. Hey, genius. That's exactly what it means to defund something. And you say, oh, but hey, think of it on the flip side. We're going to take money from the police and give it to a library, to which I say, I'm not exactly sure libraries have proven in any way that they bring down crime rates. I'm not exactly sure you put a library in a, crime-ridden neighborhood comprised of certain populations of people that suddenly, oh, the crime went down, guys. I mean, let me just put it this way. Typically, bookstores and libraries are spared from mass looting during BLM and race riots. I'm just an idea, right? But still, that's besides the point. What you're obfuscating is, yeah, you can say you're going to put the money to someone else, but you're still defunding the police. So you liar, you scammer. Why did you say that you did not call to defund the police when you explicitly did so and even doubled down on that you want to defund the police? You fixate on the word defund. Yeah, because you said you wanted to defund the police, genius. But, you can clearly see this is who we're dealing with. Another guy with a pretty long record of being a radical race and Islamic communist, and nothing exactly all that surprising. But he's going to sit there on the campaign trail and pretend that actually, even though all he does is campaign on is Palestine, that actually he's not like this just third world communist, and he cares about you and he cares about the working class. Clearly, this scammer is a guy who cares about working class people, right? But then on the flip side, so that's the, crazy far left third world candidate in the race. We have the woke establishment candidate, Haley Stevens, who on the flip side, one might argue, is not all that much better. Take a listen. Here's sort of an introduction to who she is.
I yield the gentlelady 30 additional seconds.
The gentlewoman is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
Cause of their servitude, sharing in the profession with those who have not come before you. Similar times of trying medical need, wars and flus past. You will see darkness, you will be pushed, and our society needs you. To stand together at this time, our country loves you. To our doctors and our nurses, I wear these latex
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland is reserved. The gentleman from Texas is recognized. The gentleman from Texas is now recognized. The gentlelady from Michigan is out of order.
I am going to be working on our behalf. I am going to be telling the stories on our behalf. And you better believe I'm going to be doing it with a little bit of joy, a little bit of enthusiasm, a little bit of energy, and a little bit of stick it to them. Because that's the Michigan way.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on here, but we're clearly dealing with someone who has a few screws loose. She talks like some 1950s cartoon character, not sure what's up with that. And arguably, your very typical psycho woke lady. But as I said, that's so emblematic of the divide within the Democrat Party, because keep in mind, she's basically the establishment candidate. The establishment wants her because she's not as hardcore of a Palestine activist, and she'd probably be much more loyal to Schumer, and she has political experience, for example, already being a congresswoman and all that stuff. And then on the flip side, we just have, the Mr. Third World Jihad over here, right? Abdul al-Sayed, defund the police, abolish ICE. But his big thing is AIPAC this, AIPAC that, right? He's what we've referred to as Palestine first, and that is the divide, of course, going on. And as I said, what have we been saying? Third world versus woke, and third world's currently winning. People like Haley Stevens, who probably 10 years ago were kind of the archetype. Like, she almost, in a way, when you think of Democrats from, let's say, the first Trump administration in those years, that's like, she is the image of who you think of as a Democrat, right? Like, crazy, not so well in the head, like psycho, woke white lady, like that kind of image. That's the cartoon that comes to your head. Notice how that's not the Democrat Party anymore. See, she's 10 years too late. Now the Democrat Party is who? Abdul al-Sayed. See what I'm saying here? And the current state of polling is bearing that out, because it is strongly appearing here, ladies and gentlemen. And this does not surprise me whatsoever, because we see far left, third world especially, keeps on beating woke establishment in primaries. Look at the RCP average, for example, out of the Michigan Senate primary. Al-Sayed, on average, is leading over Haley Stevens by a spread of about 5.3. You'd have to assume places like Dearborn, heavy Arabic and Islamic migration probably have something to do with that, as well as, again, the rise of Palestine first and third worldism within the Democrat Party. As usual, the Democrat establishment is watching the monster and the radicalism that they created. You could literally call it the Great Replacement, right? Because that's exactly what it is. It is the very thing they told us was a crazy far-right conspiracy theory. Not only is it happening, it's happening to them. That's the ultimate irony of all of this when you think about it, right? And then, of course, how will this translate to Mike Rogers and the general election? Because we shouldn't forget, back in 2024, arguably under an election that I still find questionable to this day. You know, a lot of people say, oh, well, we overcame all the problems from 2020. Sure, Trump dominated 2024. That's what we call too big to rig. A lot of those Midwestern Senate races were very close, right? Remember how we were winning until we were not? Anyways, though, that's besides the point. So Mike Rogers, likely Republican nominee here, how would he perform against al-Sayed? Well, you can see the current RCP average has al-Sayed only leading by about 0.5, which is virtually a tie. Keep in mind, it is the summertime, which typically summertime polls favor Democrats, especially when Democrats are not the incumbent party historically. So this is to say, right, at this point in the election season where Republican voters aren't even like coalescing yet and the Democrats have the midterm energy on their side, barely winning, if even winning at all, not a good performance. That's no secret. The guy is radical. The guy's crazy. He's an insane third world communist. But before the Stevens campaign gets cocky or uses that as a talking point, I would point out it is basically the same exact story of Rogers versus Haley Stevens, because Haley Stevens likewise may not be as politically radical, but still kind of comes off as still an insane, off-putting individual in herself. We're looking at the exact same thing. Stevens leading Mike Rogers by only 0.5, which is to say, regardless of which crazy candidate the Democrats end up picking, the crazy woke establishment candidate or the crazy anti-establishment third world communist candidate, it still sort of ends up the same place either way. They are in a rather weak position for a Senate race that otherwise, on a year like this, should be a slam dunk, should be something very easy to win. And yet, this is, at the very least, I mean, I obviously don't want either of them to be senators, but it looks like this is going to be a dogfight. And that is exactly why, for example, the Haley Stevens campaign, and this is the mudslinging now taking place, they're both calling each other unelectable for separate reasons, right?
What is their support signaling to you? How do you respond to that larger momentum in which Dr. al-Sayed is being placed inside of this wave alongside a certain ideological wing of the Democratic Party?
Well, I can tell you who else is supporting Abdul's campaign, and that's Republicans. They're spending thousands of dollars right now to prop up his candidacy, to put out paid-for polls, and no one wants Abdul to win more than the Republicans. And that's because they think that they can beat him in November. What they've never done is beaten me.
Yeah, well, there you heard apparently her theory and her justification for the abysmal poll numbers is that it's the Republicans, right, The Republicans are propping up his campaign. The Republicans are paying for the polls. Don't you know RCP stands for Republican Clear Politics or something, right? Which is kind of course, hilarious. I think we've established, looking at the comparison here, for Republicans, it doesn't make that much of a difference whether we run against Al-Sayed or Stevens. They have their own weaknesses, respectively. The end outcome, the spread, is relatively the same. But of course, when you're desperate, what are you going to do? Hey, why are you losing this Democrat primary? It's because the Republicans, guys. The Republicans are propping up the Islamic communists. Again, I don't think that's true. I don't think we really honestly care either way. We're just kind of waiting to see, I guess, who we're ultimately going to have to run against here. But still, this is kind of the freak out that's currently happening within the DNC ranks. And I would argue even outside of them, because it's a simple reality here. As we've established, no matter which direction they go, they are going to be left with an extremely weak candidate. Haley Stevens, yes, might not be perceived as radical, but she's like just extremely off-putting on a personality basis. And then Al-Sayed, we've established already some of the issues with him. But even on the flip side, I have witnessed a lot of progressives and some of his supporters. They're making all this social media stuff right now about how they're worried. As a matter of fact, they're worried that the DNC is not going to back Al-Sayed if he's the candidate. Because we saw what they just did with Plattner. Let's not forget. First, they were withdrawing funds from his campaign, saying they wouldn't support it, basically saying, we're going to make it impossible for you to win the election. And then they eventually pressured him out. It would not be unreasonable to suggest they might do something similar with Al-Sayed. Maybe it's not as dramatic. Maybe they don't force him to quit the race, but they might starve him of the resources necessary to get him over the finish line. That's also a possibility as well. But I would say either way, whatever happens here, Democrats do have a bit of a crisis on their hands in Michigan. They do have a problem because obviously there's going to be either way. First of all, you're going to be going in with a very divided Democrat electorate because half of the party is going to be pissed either way, right? If they choose the quote-unquote AIPAC candidate, you know all the third worlders. Do you think she's going to be able to run up the turnout in Dearborn, Michigan, for example, after the Arabs and Muslims there just watched as you took out their guy? No. But then on the flip side, for whatever her supporters are left, whatever moderates, quote unquote, that don't want Mamdani characters taking over the party, what does Al-Sayed's victory say? Is he going to do well with, let's say, white, suburban, woke female liberals like, for example, Haley Stevens? That's also going to be something to watch. And then either way, you boil it down, they're both respectively rather weak candidates. So, Michigan's been a hard state to crack. Even back in 2022 on the mini red trickle kind of year, we still couldn't get over in Michigan. We didn't even come close. That's a hard one, but hey, came rather close in 2024. Mike Rogers almost won. But now we're left with the position where Democrats once again cannot find a normal candidate, right? They can't find someone normal to run. So we're left with basically two different freak shows here. And if there is an opportunity to take advantage of those vulnerabilities, of those weaknesses, by the way, drive Republican turnout higher because the Democrats are off-putting, scary, and insane, this might be the chance to do it. So not going to predict right now what happens in Michigan. General election's a long ways away, but I would say I believe our shots here are a lot better than they otherwise would be in a normal election. Again, just because of that fact, Democrats can't find a normal person. And it's kind of hilarious. It's also hilarious to watch them point fingers at each other when in reality, they're both kind of guilty of the same things. You can say whatever AIPAC. Well, I'm not bought by AIPAC and she is or whatever. I don't care, right? You guys are both insane, crazy weirdos just for different reasons. You guys both clearly are very dangerous to hand power to, but it's just a conversation of why, right? The why of why you shouldn't give these people power. Anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.